Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with me. We're talking about column formatting, but using another method, the render function. So what's different between the render function and using classes? Okay, render functions are a little bit different, but once you get the hang of them, of course, you'll have more tools in your tool belt to get you there. But there's two ways you can do a render function. We just learned about using classes in the columns builder, and that's the first method I'm going to show you. We'll use the columns builder. We'll go in there and use the button to say render this column in a certain way. And you typically would do that when you want to apply that specific rendering to one or two columns, maybe three. Examples would be, I have a date column and I want to be able to format that specifically, or I have a phone number column and I want to format that phone number and the cell phone number, two different phone numbers the same way. You can also use it to merge two columns together into one new column, right? So those are kinds of formats for rendering using the builder. Another option that we're going to show you is the JS function. So when we go in the JS function, we're going to have to add a new area to the code. And this one, although it does work really well, you have to hand type this. This is something you kind of have to get a style and figure out how to do this. There's no builder for you to say, hey, please add this section to it. So you would use this kind of JS rendering function when you want to apply a style to lots of columns. For example, a numeric column on our financial data, we might want to say everything needs to be in a certain currency format. So we could apply that instead of in the column builder, apply to 12 months or whatever. We can say, hey, write this render function and allow that to apply to 12 months in a different way. So they kind of act the same. They're just formatted a little bit differently. We're going to take a peek at what that does. So just so you understand, rendering can happen both here in the columns builder that I just mentioned, and this is where you would actually free type your rendering function to allow you to do that. Or the render functions will happen in this area of the JS function under the section called column definitions. So there's plenty of documentation on this in DataTables, but this is the area we're going to focus on. We'll show you how to use a column builder quickly, and then we'll come in here and spend a little time on how the what to look for and the benefits of using column definitions to create your reports. Okay, so in this demo, we're going to look at formatting dates and times because that happens a lot. And then we're also going to, format some numbers, and we're going to work a little bit with concatenation and strings and showing you guys how to do that. So just to point out, I didn't mention this in the last file because it wasn't used yet, but I have updated the contacts data to include a date field. So I made up a date that said, hey, when this person was created, this record was created. And I did that only to be able to support our lessons on the date and times. So if you have an older file, just make sure that you grab this demo file and you get the contacts information updated. And to be able to make that work, I've also updated the JSON calculation. So that's it. Let's hop over to the demo file and learn how to use render functions. We are in the demo file 5.4, and this time we're going to look at column formatting using render functions. So let's get started. All right. The first thing we're going to do is continue on from our ugly lesson in 5.3 on formatting. I want to show you how to use the column builder to be able to render in that tool, as well as what we're going to learn in the second part of this lesson in the JS function. So go to your 5.3 video and let's go ahead and duplicate this record. And we're going to name this one 5.4A in this case, because I know that we're going to be doing two separate lessons and I want them to be distinct for you guys. So we're doing that, and I'm going to come over here and paste the title, so it wouldn't take me as long. The formatting is obviously not correct, but let's go ahead and say get started on this. So the first thing we have here is a copy of the ugly formatting, and what we're going to do now is go into our columns builder, and I want you guys to add the phone number here. So we're going to add the phone, and what we want to do is quick resequence the list. So now we have the phone coming last here. Nothing else is added, no class or renders. Let's go back and see that that phone number has been added. All right, you guys can tell phone 1 here. And the current format looks fine. It's got 408-758. But what we're going to do in this case is we're going to actually add a render function to this field to display it with an area code with brackets. So back to our columns builder. So what we're going to do now is on the phone 1 field, first of all, let's just rename that to be phone. And let's go into this render thing. It's going to open up a window. And this part is you're kind of on your own. You're going to have to go find a rendering function, copy it from somewhere and type it in here. And I'm really just giving you a place to put the placeholder in. And I've copied this form, this function right here that's basically going to say, take the value in this field and column and format it to have brackets, parse it out, kind of get the substring of it. So you kind of have to work with this to get what you want it to do. But what I really want to show you is here is just a freeform text box where you can apply whatever rendering style or function you want in here. When we hit submit close here and we submit the changes, I would expect to see my phone number, now the name's changed, with the new formatting style. So I added the brackets and I put a space in between here. Not that you need to do this, but this is just proving to you that you can take existing text and concatenate or add characters or split the value you have and do something with it. Okay, that is good. Now we're going to go back into the builder and I want to show you a new feature that we haven't gone over yet. There's a button up here called add new column. So we're going to do that. It's a new feature added to this series. But when we do this, you're going to get prompted and say, is this new column going to be a button or not? In this case, we do not want a button. We will do that in a future lesson, but we're going to say no. And then it asks you again, would you like this new column added to the beginning or the end? For the purposes of this, we're going to add it to the end. All right. So you can see here, we have a new column added and I'm just gonna change the name here to say new name. We'll make it big, new name. And right here, you can see that it's got a delete icon, the rest do not. That is intentional. I don't want you to be able to delete any of the original data columns, but I do want you to be able to delete any columns that you have added because these are all gonna be things that we add to the existing data as new fields or columns on your report. Okay, so the other thing I want to do is I'm going to put this in the position of 1.5 if this rings a bell, and then I'm going to resequence the list because all I want to do is move this new name up to the top. All right, there's nothing here yet, so I have it visible. I'm not searching on this field. I'm not ordering these fields, but if I go back, there really shouldn't be anything there. We might even get a warning saying, hey, there's no data to display. And I have my column, but there's nothing in here. So what we're going to go do now is actually create a value to put in this new column. So back to our new name, and we're going to hit the word render here. And the next thing we're going to do now in this new name is, let me hit submit close here for a minute, just to show you what I'm trying to say. We had a name field earlier that I had calculated in the context to say full name, last name, first name. But what if you didn't have that in your data set? I guess what we're trying to do here is we're going to create a new first name, last name combination instead of using first name and last name independently or the calculated values. And remember, this one's already in here, but we're showing it as an ugly wingdings font. So what we're going to do is create a new field with the intention that we didn't have a concatenated first and last name. So when I go to render back here now, what I want to do is render the concatenate. So give me a second to populate that for you. The render function to do this is basically saying, here's the function. The result is I want this row's last name plus a comma plus the row's first name. So I'm formatting it last name first and returning that. Let's go ahead and see if that worked. Perfect. Here's new name, and it's got the last name with the comma and Maryland. So I can see there's a comma between that. I'm going to go quickly fix my function because that doesn't quite look right. So you have some trial and error here, but do you see how I have row name and I think there is a space between the comma and that. So we've got that cleared up, come back to our list. And yes, now I see this value here. Okay, that's how we can concatenate a string and do so. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to add the column definitions now. So what I want to show you is we can go back to the columns and we can add rendering functions here, right, by doing it so. But there's another way. And what I want to make sure we do before I quit here is I'm going to just also add this date created field to our report, resequence the list so that it's there for the future. All right, so let's submit the changes. Let's see, we've got all that stuff here. One last thing I want to do is remove this ugly large font. It's really hard to look at our reports with that. So an easy way to do this is go into your CSS, find that go big, and I'm just going to comment out the font size, and hopefully that brings it back into perspective. Okay, so we have this report going on now, and I added the dates over here, and you can see that's there. What I want to do is show you guys now how to use the JS function tab to also render your data. So when we come here, where we put this is we're going to have to enter some spacing below this. So it needs to come within the declaration of the DataTables abilities and what it has for or the settings. So the thing that we're going to do now is we have to put in, how do I want to call this? We have to put in this naming tag called column definitions, and I'm pasting this in here. So column defs is like the DOM or the length menu. We're defining something about the column definitions themselves. And what I ended up doing is I copied over the class name center, and I'm telling it I want to target the columns of 1 and 3. Now, it's not the physical columns of 1 and 3, it's the index columns. So if you look over here, I'm saying that we need to, this is going to be column 0, 1, 2, and 3. So what I expect to see is that if I say columns 1, the new name and the address should be centered. Let's see what happens. All right, new name and address are centered. And because I had that blue or gray background on it, I can obviously see that's happening there. So we have two ways to add classes. We have the classes already existing here. We can add them in the column builders using this method, or in our JS function tab, we can define a class name and assign it to multiple targets. That's pretty straightforward. What we're going to do now is we are going to work with that date field. So a lot of times dates come in multiple formats, and we have to adjust that to be something else. So you can see here, if I sorted this, it does sort, but the numbers are kind of spaced because 2, 9, and 3, you know, with the digits. So we're going to just play around and show you how you can actually render dates to match your source data to what you want it to be. All right, but the first thing we have to do is add the actual scripting to I should say this, we need a library to be able to put into the system. So what we're going to do is go over to our libraries function here, and we are going to add the required, required library to handle dates. So what I'm going to do here is copy the library that you need, and I'm putting it underneath this optional JavaScript extension. And really what it's saying is you need the moment.js library to do this next step. So I have that in here. And the next thing we're going to do is actually put the rendering function for the, how do I want to say this? We want to we want to render the date created to the format. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is the 10th, but we can't. It's got to be indexed, remember? So this is zero-based index. But I am going to try to show you a trick. Let me copy the function that you're going to need into our system here. So let's go into the JS function, and you notice there's a comma there, and I'm going to add my extra spacing here. And what I'm doing is I'm pasting the function that we're going to do. And basically we're saying, render this, whatever target field I tell it here. The data came in as such, and I want it to be outputted as such. And then here's a language character. So right now we need to figure out where is the target. So if I put this on here, it may or may not work, because I'm saying point to target 2, which would be 0, 1, 2. That's not the date field, but let's just go see what happens. Nothing happened. But remember, it's zero-based index. So if I go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I expect when I put 9 in here, this value to change. It's really important to understand indexes. So if I put 9, I'm hoping my date field now comes out in the format of like January 1st, something like that. All right, do you see how what's happened here? We've got September, May spelled out, and it's got the 0 leading on the date. So I'm going to leave it at that. You can change your dates to do anything you want. I am, though, going to go back to the columns here and just prettify that up and just say hire date. And we're going to also add a class to it to say write, and submit that and see if we get it to look good. All right, so now here's our hire date. We added a class. We have a render function that's completely separate for it, and we are good to go. Let's see. The next thing we're going to do is actually stop with the context. We've kind of gotten this all figured out. We're going to actually go to our 5.2 data elements lesson, and we're going to duplicate this and add some formatting to our financial statement to get it prepared. So let's go ahead and duplicate 5.2. Let's name it 5.4b. And for purposes of quickly doing this, I'll copy the name that we're going to do and paste this here. So the name of it is this, and we're actually going to stay with financial. So that's a good thing, and we'll submit and close that. So the next thing we need to know is, back then we didn't have all of our CSS styling. So I'm going to go grab it from our previous video or previous lesson. So I just grab this because I know I've got all of this stuff done. So as you have a library of data tables, reuse your code, repurpose it, come here, copy it, puts it to the clipboard, and I come over here to 5.4b, and I'm just going to delete what was in there, and I'm going to override with the latest columns. All right, so let's preview that. The only thing that changed is this header got that padding that we added. So everything else looks the same. The only thing we ever have declared in here is that this is it. But you can kind of see that our top widget and our data don't match up. Let me show you where you can fix that. Do you see where it says width 98.5? If I were just to say width 100%, let's see. Now this thing is fully the whole length of the table. So that's another element you can change. What I want to show you what we can do in here is that the classes are not assigned to any columns in here. So if I went into the builder, no classes are there. Even though I haven't assigned it to anything, they all exist. But just like we did in the last function, if we add let's see. I'm going to add the column definitions from the last video that or the last time we did this. Let's see. Let's go ahead and we're going to reorder, put this column definitions here. I'm just pasting from the last lesson. We're going to add this this value, and we're going to put it on the very first column, and we're going to add the words or the class of center, and let's just see if that works. So we're saying in the column definitions, we are targeting the 0th column, so the first column, and we're going to give it a class name. Let's make sure it works here. Perfect. We copied our CSS in from before. We haven't assigned it to any columns individually, but we still can repurpose that. What I want to show you is that when you say targets here, I can do multiple targets. So I can say 0 and let's say column 3. So when I go over here, now column 0 and 3. So this allows you to select multiple things to style. So that leads us into our next ability here. What we want to do is take all of this January through December data, and we want to format that with some kind of number formatting. How do we do that? All right, back to our column definitions. Within here, we're going to add another. I'm just going to copy this so you guys get an idea of replicating it. We're going to, we aren't going to use a class name this time. And so let's get rid of that. Let's first decide what are the targets going to be. If I came over here, 0, 1, 2, 3, I know some 4 plus 12 is going to be our targets that we want to format. So for the purposes of just keeping this kind of less to type, I'm just going to say columns 4, 5, and 6, which are the first 3 months. Those are the ones I'm pointing at. Nothing right now is happening to them because I haven't told the system what to do with 4, 5, and 6, those columns. But now I'm going to actually show you guys like what is the function that we're going to use to render currency. And again, you're going to have to do some research to do some of this, but I will share with you what I have found. And that is targets can come below or after. It doesn't matter as long as these things are separated by a column, or I mean a comma. So right here, I am saying, please render columns or index columns 4, 5, and 6 to have this number format. So basically you have to look at it a little closer, but we're adding a $sign. We're saying we don't want any decimal places. We want 0, add a comma. So if you were working with a different currency, you could change the font or the leading character. You can move this information around. Let's go preview that and see what that looks like. Okay, we can see that the dollar format has added and we do not have any additional information. It's not perfect or pretty, but you can see what we're doing with this. So let's quickly, if I wanted to do this, I could just say, hey, 5, 6, and then you just add the columns as you go along. And then I think we need to get up to 15 if I do the math right. So let's just go see what our preview is. And now everything has currency format. It's not wrapping great, but we'll worry about that in a little bit. The last thing I want to show you about using the JS function is that we can also combine fields here to give us some more space. So if we're looking here, I'm seeing the word account and scenario, and the word actuals is repeated a lot. What I want to do is I want to merge these two fields into one field and kind of shorten that up. So the next column definition that we're going to render is that we're going to take this, how do I want to say this? We're going to take a column here, and I'm going to copy this for you guys to see. And these really don't need to be in any order, but I think they also trump the later you are down. So we're saying take column 0, I believe, and let's say 1. And what we're saying is I want to render column 1 to say, please take the account number and add the scenario, but only the first character with it, and have it in brackets, similar to what we did with the phone number. So let's go see if that actually rendered correctly. Perfect. We took column 1, which is 0 base index, so 1 here, and we said use the account field and my field of actual, and we just took the first character. So that's pretty cool that you can modify and change the way things are visualized here. Let's just go back to the builder quick and clean this up. Since we merged those fields, I don't believe that we need to show the account number anymore. And the scenario, we can say account here, and we can say actual, ABF, which is like account, actual, budget, and forecasted. I have no idea if that's even smart, but let's just do it. And so now we have the account, actual, budget, forecasted. We got rid of the other one, and everything works just fine here. Okay, one thing you have to be very careful on is your indexing. If I go into this and I say, hey, January, do you see how May here does not have any formatting? Let's go back to our columns quick, look at the builder. I'm going to resequence this list. This is important because now my indexes changed last time I was here. When I hit resequence your list, now this is first, second, third. January is going to be 4th, and 15th is but remember, it's not zero-based indexed here. Come back here, and we've got some issues. The columns that I referred to are not, they moved around. So we need to make sure when we use this, and this is one reason I don't love this method. Do this method when you have you're not going to be changing columns around anymore. But now, because I have this feature, I've got to go ahead and say, oh, I've got to change this really to be 2. I only want it on 2. My function here is, let's see, it changed on me because I changed the index. You've got to be very careful on what you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and say, oops, be careful on that. Edit, undo if you delete. And I'm going to go and change this one to be 0. And I think we're not quite ready yet. So I've got this back. I've got the business unit, the years shaded, but I'm missing January and June in my styling. Well, it's probably because my index changed. So I'm adding 3. Oh, and I can tell I missed 8. All right. That's why it gets a little bit kludgy, but now we have everything kind of looking the way we need to. We're not quite done with all of our formatting yet. We're going to get this thing prettified, but you've now seen how to use render functions both as a column and in the JS function to help you stylize both locally on 1 or 2 columns or the entire, a large amount like these numbers are. Okay, we will see you in the next lesson where we're going to wrap some things up and add some fun icons and buttons and stuff like that.